Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Today I'd like to put on the record my support for this report. I'd like to acknowledge the work that's gone into it and many of the people involved. I'd like to talk about the role of planning, and particularly planning for infrastructure for the future of Australia. And I'd like to call on the government to act now, to tell us when the High-Speed Rail Planning Authority will be brought into existence and what action the government's going to take on this particular report. I've been a member of this committee and I'm absolutely delighted to say to my colleagues in the House that it's a bipartisan report. So for those people who worry about government getting together and doing things, in this case we have. The unanimous agreement of that committee says we've got the report, we've got the agreement, and now we need to act. And I'd like to just talk about the future. My belief is that the future of Australia lies in quality infrastructure. And as the report says, this quality infrastructure, in this case high-speed rail, solves problems for the cities and it solves problems for the regions. Deputy Speaker, as you would know, our trains have laid the foundation for Australian development, beginning in the late 1800s. And I acknowledge the role and the vision of those great British engineers and entrepreneurs who came to Australia, came to Canada, came to India, and they built railway lines. And these railway lines provided the absolute foundation we needed to grow and develop. It enabled our freight from the country to be moved to the ports and our status as a trading nation to get underway. And it enabled our people to move. And I, for example, and I know many, many, many people from rural and regional Australia, got on the train, went to Melbourne, went to uni, and did all our socialising on the trains as well. But it's not just to university to study, it's to go to the cities for meetings, for medicines, for all the things that we need. Our train is the preferred form of transport. In regional Victoria, our trains are our lifeblood, and there's another whole conversation that we need to have about effective train delivery. But today I'd like to speak particularly about high-speed rail as the key for our future and how important this report is. But in doing so, Deputy Speaker, I'd really like to acknowledge some of the people that have done an enormous amount of work behind it. So I particularly want to congratulate and thank John Alexander, the MP for Bennelong. He's been our inner city champion, our visionary. John, you've done a fantastic job. You've put hours and hours and hours of work into this, and I think you should be really congratulated on getting to this stage. I'd also like to acknowledge the previous member, the MP for Grandla, Anthony Albanese. He's also our inner city champion. As he said, he knows this topic backwards. He's brought up the private members bill. We've got before the parliament now, setting up an authority that could fund what we need to do. So the member for Grandla has been a huge champion, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank him for his work. And I hope that he can work with the member for Bennelong, these two wonderful Sydney electorates, to be of service to us regional people. In my electorate, the members of the Wodonga Council, I'd really like to put on the record Patience Harrington and your staff, Michael Goebel and the full team. You've been working on this topic forever. You've been really strong regional champions. So to all the staff and to the councillors over the years, you've provided visionary leadership, you've written reports, you've responded to inquiries, you've organised conferences, and you've firmly put Albury, but in my case Wodonga, on the map as being one of the key places where this high-speed rail needs to go. So to Patience and your team, this report's for you. But I'd also like to acknowledge the work of another, I think, individual. There's been many individuals, but one in particular I'd like to acknowledge today, and that's Tim Fischer, AC, previously Deputy Prime Minister, ex-member for Farrer, a wise elder statesman and generally known as a good bloke. He loves trains. And it was him who first introduced to me this concept of what a high-speed train could do for our community. And so to Tim, I'd like to just take a moment in this House to honour and acknowledge and thank you for everything you've done for us all, but particularly in the area of trains and transport. You've been a real champion. You've carried the flag and the heart and the fire for a really long time. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you. Dare I say how much we love you and how much we appreciate your fascination and support for trains. You really are a leading light for us in our work. So thanks, Tim. And finally, in an interesting way, I'd like to acknowledge Kevin Rudd, an unlikely champion, that I was a participant in 2008 of the 2020 summit. And at that 2020 summit in this place, there was a working group on infrastructure. And I'd come from my community as a community worker to talk about the future. And that infrastructure team brainstormed and workshopped what were the drivers for the future of Australia. And the report that we came up with, and has just really influenced my thinking, was the need for regional hubs and the infrastructure linking us. That if we could put that into place, we would have a country that was really well positioned for the next century, just like the English did in the last century for us. So to acknowledge the importance of gatherings like the summit, to bring people together across disciplines, across regions, and say, how can we make this happen? But that summit was a long, long time ago. Since then, we've had lots of reports, we've had lots of discussions, lots of conferences, and we're still not there. So this report is particularly important to me because it's unanimous. It's clear recommendations. It says what needs to be done. So I'd like just to remind the Parliament, and particularly to the government, that we can do this. We actually can come together around local, state and federal government, and we can do nation building on a really grand scale. Like clearly we all know about the Snowy Mountains Authority, and in my particular case it's the Albury-Wodonga Development Corporation. What an amazing thing it was in those 1970s and 80s to be part of a visionary Australia that invested, that brought the tax office out of Melbourne, Sydney, and invested in Albury-Wodonga. We brought manufacturing in, we built a city, and I was the beneficiary of that. So I know we can do visionary stuff. We can have a plan, we can have a vision, and most importantly, we can bring people with us. And bringing people with us from the city and the regions makes this country whole. So I'm talking to the Prime Minister, I'm talking to the government, I'm talking to the Minister for Infrastructure. I'm talking about, let's do this. We've got the report, we've got the recommendations, now all we need is the political will. We actually need the plan, as the member for Grayndler has said, to get the corridor working. But what we really, really need is some indication from the government that they've got a commitment to nation building in rural and regional Australia, that they're prepared to do the planning, that they've got the vision, and that they are actually got the political will to do it. So that's my call out of today, to have the political will. But in bringing my presentation and support for this particular report to a close, I'd like to make a comment to three of my constituents that are in the House today, and to acknowledge you coming to Canberra and being part of it and learning how the process works. But I'd particularly like to say to the young people that when people ask you about Canberra and how it works, you can say that in this report you've seen collaboration, you've seen people come and work together, you've seen a nation-building project at the heart of really good planning. It's a report on inquiry that's happened, a committee working well together, and I'm hoping that in your lifetime, certainly before you're as old as I am, that you will live in Yakandanda and Wodonga and Wangaratta, and that you will be able to hop on this high-speed rail that's got internet, that works on time, and you can go to Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Western Australia, or wherever you have to do, so that you can live in the country and live the lives that you need. And I would say to the Prime Minister, for these young people who live in rural and regional Australia, can you do this? Can you find the political will to build us a high-speed rail now? That I've been around a long time and I don't want to be an old woman in the nursing home in Yakandanda and still not have it built. So my words in closing, where's the plan?
I thank the member for Indi.